Welcome back to Alley Cat Paint Design. It's Matt here. We're going to start a new project. As you can see, I have a piece of plywood here. I even have a couple here. And what we're going to do is we're going to prime these to get this project started. This is going to be a cabinet build for our utility room. So I got a number of things out here. So I've got my tray out already. I've got the paint poured in it. I also brought out 2 light boxes, one of which you've seen me be working on in another project. But the whole reason I'm priming is knots. This is not cabinet grade plywood, but I don't want pine, sap, etc. from coming through my paint, so I want to prime it. Same thing with this. Here's a knot, and there's another knot on this one. This one doesn't have knots, not that I saw, but it's a good idea to prime it. So while I've got primer out and I'm priming, why not prime those? Always be thinking ahead. This is one project that I'm focusing on right now, but it doesn't mean I can't jump in on others. I'm already going to have the paint out, roller, brush, whatever. So let's just do it, right? I'm going to go ahead and sign off. The next video will be picked up when this is all finished and we start to cut all the material, and I'll show you that process. So now that we've got our plywood primered, we got to look at our plans. Okay, so don't look at these with too much scrutiny here, but this is our dryer, our washer, the cabinet that'll go in between, and this cabinet will have a pull out where our trash cans go. So that's what it's going to be, kind of to an extent. So before we get to cutting our wood, we need to have an idea of how many pieces we need, how big the pieces are, and kind of have a plan. So I know that we have 2 sides, a left and a right, and we know the height and we know the depth. Unfortunately, because the sheet of plywood is 4 foot by 8 foot, we're going to have a 36 inch tall sides. 36 out of 48 doesn't leave a whole lot left, so we're going to rip right down the middle, and the majority of it will be for the left and right side. Then all of the other bits and pieces, the bottom where the trash cans go and the storage begins, little things like that will come out of the rest of the plywood, which won't be very much. I'm doing that because I didn't have a lot of primer. I only used a single quart. I primered one whole side. I also primed some other pieces. There won't be enough left, I don't think, to do a whole nother side of plywood. So if I cut out what we need and then just prime what we're using, I'll be able to stretch that primer out and finish. I'm gonna get started. I got my table saw out. I'm gonna cut, I'm gonna rip down off of my table saw so I have nice straight cut pieces, but I'll start with the sides and the bottom, and then we'll go from there, and I'll cut out all the other remaining pieces, and then I can finish priming. Once we get to assembly and things like that, I'll start to go through that with you. All right, see you in the next one. We've got all of our pieces cut and need to prime them, but there's something to consider. Remember, I've talked over and over about think ahead, think ahead, think ahead. This is the width of our tray. This will be a slide out tray that our trash cans go in, so that you pull the trash cans out, you put trash in it, you close it back up, like any other kind of cupboard. But when you go to do this, the width of your cabinet will be dependent on several things. Like, I'm going to put edges on my drawer to strengthen it, because this thinner plywood will want to bow and flex. So I'm going to use this. Also, I want drawer glides so that it slides out smoother and easier. So you've got to keep in mind width of that, which will help determine the width of your shelf. If I need a 21-inch shelf, I have to subtract the width of that and the width of that. Well, what I'll end up with is I'll make a cabinet for a 21-inch shelf. I'll cut a 21-inch shelf, and then when I add these things, it'll be more like 22 and it won't fit. I hope that that's clear and understandable. It just takes forethought and preparation. These items are all ready to be primed. The other side of the plywood is already primed. I already did that. Let's look at the next part of this project. We're going to be making 2 cabinets out of this one. Now, in other projects, I've reused material and stuff, and I'm sure people have said, well, what are you going to do that for? Why don't you just buy 2? Well, I bought this one, I think it was $5. Why not use it? Some things to think about. We already took the shelves out, because what I need to do is I need to cut it in half. Back behind here are screws. There's a screw on each side helping hold this style to this style. Same thing at the top. So you got to be careful. Make sure you don't cut through screws or nails. So I got to get this cut right down the middle. Then another thing to consider is it won't just be just a standard straight on cut right through and then slap a piece of plywood on. Why, you might ask? Just going to use this piece of plywood for example. If I made a cut and then slapped this plywood on here, as you can see, you would see the edge of the plywood. The whole point of a cabinet is that the style cover, just like it does does here. See how this would dead end into the stile and the stile covers it. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to have a recess like this one does, but what that would mean technically is I cut this right here, then I need to come in the back here on this material, and I need to cut in a little further to allow room for my plywood to sit in, or you'll see the plywood through the face. I don't know if that makes enough sense, but I'm going to cut it and I'll show you what I mean kind of after the fact. What I did was I marked a line, and this line I checked by using a tape measure on the back side with a mirror to see where the screw holes were. So this line, as long as I hit that line, I should miss both screws, should be on either side. Now I'm going to use a table saw. So what I've done is I've set my fence length, and I've put that line to hit the middle of my saw blade so that I'm neither right or left of it, I'm right down the middle. And that should keep me away from both screws. It's a pretty big cut, pretty difficult, so make sure you have help and be safe, wear your safety glasses. Have everything you might have or need ready. Make sure you have nothing in the way. I have trouble with my fence, so I have to clamp it, so make sure you don't have anything in the way that's going to hinder your cut. All right, the cut went really well. One thing I didn't suggest was make sure your depth of your blade, you want to be sure you've cut it all the way through one time. You really don't want to have to do it more than once. But it went all the way through into the back of my material here, right? So now what I need to do, this is the material that I'll be putting on the side. Even if that goes exactly to the edge of my cut, that means I need to come over here and make this cut over here, not over here. Or what'll happen is this wood, it'll be like that. It'll be sticking out from the face, like I described. We want that to be flush so that you don't see this at all. This will actually be back behind like that. If we don't do that, then it'll be like that. So I'm going to mark that. I'm going to cut those three sides, and then I can finish priming and cutting my plywood sides that are going to go in here. Okay, so what I've done is I've used my plywood that we're going to use as the end cap, and I've got my measurements. So as you can see from the cut, this is now where I need to cut. On these two outside lines, I need to remove all this inner material all the way across. Then there'll be separate pieces, and then I can use that plywood to end cap each side. Another thing to think about when you're working on cabinets, this is kind of a pain, and it really messes people up. It's messed me up. When you're making measurements, especially across the face of a cabinet, don't forget this. That can mess you up. Because you don't expect that sometimes, and you'll measure and you'll think, oh, it's going to be great. You'll put it up and then realize, oh, I need more room because this is here. I didn't think about that. Another thing too is when you're measuring, like let's say I wanted to find this line. I come over here and I measure right here. I see that's 15 1/4. Well, then I can't come over here and measure from the outside to 15 1/4 because it won't line up. If I measure from the inside here, I need to also measure from the inside here. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Just things to think about. Keep thinking ahead. Always be thinking ahead on these things. Save yourself a lot of headache. I've got those cut all the way through except the top and the bottom of the cabinet. I used a small carpenter square and then a large carpenter square to trace those lines from beginning all the way down to the other side. That's how I did that. And then I cut this on my table saw. I'm going to use a jigsaw to finish these cuts. They probably won't be the best because I'm not a great jigsaw user, but I'm going to use it anyway. All right, they've been severed. We now have two cabinets, and you can see here what I meant by the screw on the back of that stile. So now with these separated, now my plywood fits just behind my stile. So when you look at it, you don't see plywood sticking out like that. It stays back where it belongs. On to finishing priming all of my materials, and I've pre-drilled my shelf holes to match the shelf holes inside the cabinet. Then I'll attach this to the side. The outside I will probably paint with a roller and brush because that'll be a lot easier to get to. Here's our door, the door that I'm going to use for this project. So the width of the cabinet will be determined by the width of the cabinet door itself. So we have 19 1/2. I think I'm going to go ahead and go to 20. This is the stile that I'll have for the right and the left side. So it in itself is 3/4 of an inch. So I think I'll be all right with 20, will be just fine. What I need to do now is take these pieces, and I'll need to cut them so that when I put them in between these, the length of these coupled with the thickness of this times 2 is 20 inches. 19 5/16 should work just fine. So I'm on 0. I'm not moving it anywhere, so I'm just going to lock that in. You saw me start each one with a cut, even though it could have already been square. You can check it with a square. Really, they looked pretty square, but it just never hurts to start with a fresh cut. Fresh cut, flip it over, measure, and cut again. Now I know I've got square ends. What I'm going to do now is, this is the stile for the bottom, so 3 1/16. So this will be the piece that goes across the front. So I'm going to come up and I'm going to mark 3 1/16, 3 1/16. That is where my drawer glides will sit, right on top of that line. Use this square along the front, do the line, grab me a line. This is the glide. See how it's got this bump up here at the top? That's how you know this goes on the right side. I want to keep this gap here the same all the way down from my line to that. And then as you can see down here towards the end, there's a bit of a bend. That's so as your drawer goes back, it wants to slide into that. Kind of keeps it from wanting to creep back out. Mark a few of the holes. Now we'll do the same thing on this side. Line up the front here and then make sure I've got my line. And then we'll do the same with this side. Now I'm done with the glides. Now what I'm going to do is, because this will sit on the front of the plywood, I'm going to want something behind here to support it. And since I'm already going to use these pieces of material, I'm going to put 4 of them, 1, 2, and 3, and 4. I'm going to put this one, instead of flat with the bottom, I'm going to put it about midway up. And that'll give me something to attach that piece of oak to right here. I want them to be the same on both sides, so I think I might even just turn this one this way. I'm going to attach these with Brad's glue and probably 1 screw each, just to be sure they're good and held. I'll be putting 4 across the bottom, I think just 2 on the back, 4 also across the top. Top will be a little bit different as well, I'll show you that. Alright, this is the brad nailer I'm going to use. These work great when you have a project that you want to get kind of tacked together quickly. I put that first brad in because I was holding the piece of wood, and you don't want your fingers near it, because if you aren't angling the gun at a good angle, the brad will come right out and right into your finger. So I started by tacking the first one, then I could move my hand down the wood and tack the second one so that my fingers were not in danger of being hit. After I drilled the holes, I used this countersink bit to give me a bit of an indentation so that the head of the screw, when it pulls in, doesn't want to pucker the wood up. See how that head fits right down in there, nice and neat. Now, just like I did this for the stile that goes across the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing for the stile that goes across the top. Okay, now across the top, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to use a piece of combined material. It's all pine, similar to like a butcher block top. All the pieces of wood are butted together and glued. So in order to keep them together, what I do, let's just say this is our whole top and each individual pieces are glued together. I would run strips across the back, probably at least 3. And that'll help keep all the pieces pulled together, and not only pulled together, but hopefully help keep them flat. So when I go to put this on, the top is going to sit flat on the edge, just like that. However, the little strips that I put underneath it will not, so it'll be like that. So what I need to do is leave these pieces a little bit so that when I go to attach it, this sits flat, flush like it's supposed to. And then this piece is sandwiched between the top and my piece here. And then what I can do is I can run screws through here into this and not into my top, because I sure don't want screws coming out my top. Okay, so there we go. That's what the cabinet's going to look like. There's the cabinet door. So now what we'll do is we'll do the stiles, top and bottom and in between. That'll sturdy up the front of it a little bit, and then it'll really get even sturdier when we put the top on. So the top and the bottom piece, the other day when I started to paint them, I just lightly went over them. They're not completely coated. This side's not even painted. That'll be the bottom where it meets the floor. Nobody will see that. Got to cut them to length so that they fit from side to side, and then we'll fit the other stiles right in the middle. Now you can put different types of pieces of material similar to this kind of back behind it to help hold it on. See, like once I put this in place, I could put a screw or two from the back so you don't have to see any tack holes or nail holes or anything from the front. You could also run a similar piece of material up the side. Like this is way too big. I just mean like a slice of it. Run it up the side, and you could even clamp and glue it so that from the outside you don't see any tacks either. And then when you put your stile on the front, you've got something to really attach to. Otherwise, I do have kind of a narrow surface here. And my intent was to put some kind of an extra cleat behind there, something for it to hold on to. So let's start with the top and the bottom. We'll go from there. When I go to put this on, I'm going to clamp it so when I put screws in from behind, it doesn't want to push the material off. It can do that, and then you're wrestling with it. Use a clamp, it helps a lot. Okay, what I'm doing is making sure that my screw that I've chosen to use will not go through. And look at there, it won't. What we don't want is the tip of it sticking out of the front. So even if I countersink the back a little bit, I've still got a good amount of room. 1¼ inch screws will work. Kind of awkward. It's kind of awkward trying to video this while I'm working, especially working kind of on an underside here, so forgive me, you're not going to see everything. This top one's a little different. Didn't quite, I didn't turn this like I did at the bottom, but we can fix that. What I need to do is cut these. Actually, I just need to cut one. Okay, what we need to do is see how well this is going to be covered once this is in place. So once this is even with the top here, does it stick out? And it does not. Now, I stayed away from the end when I screwed this one in, and now I'm going close to the end. That's not on purpose. This screw was a little too low, really wasn't biting into that. But the closer you go to the end of this these are plywood pieces. And the closer you go, you'll just start spreading those plywood pieces apart. Okay, now I can attach my top piece. And as you can see, it's not overhanging. Go ahead and pre-drill again. Okay, there's our cabinet with the top and the bottom stiles. Now I need to do the two sides. Pick that up in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.